One thing we always point out is, we're waiting and waiting and waiting for the storm to make landfall, but just because, remember, when the storm makes landfall, that's the middle of the storm. So we really are getting some very strong effects already from Henri. 8 o'clock advisory keeps it at 70-mile-per-hour winds. It's still at a very strong tropical storm, slowing down just ever so slightly and moving now to the northwest, which we thought would happen at 16 miles an hour. So it pushes it just a little bit closer for a potential landfall, at least a little closer to Connecticut, but we're not sure at this point if it'll be in Connecticut or not. You see the feeder bands associated with it, and I'll show you the radar in bigger scope in a moment, but they're making it all the way through Boston right now. Some very heavy rain we just showed you on the camera in parts of New Haven right now. The live radar showing that effectively up 91 from New Haven all the way up into, let's call it Meriden, right by 691. Some very moderate to heavy rain poking through. And we're getting our first very heavy rain bands, some isolated stuff in Tolland and Windham County as well. Here's a look at a bigger picture. Again, watch those bands. They continue up now into Boston. There it is. And again, storm itself still got about 3 hours before making it to a southeastern Connecticut, or excuse me, southeastern New England, I should say, landfall. Still looking about 12, 1, 2 o'clock for those effects to be at their worst, because that's where you have the worst of the effects, right near the center of the storm. But those feeder bands are already kicking through. Again, gently to the northwest potentially. There's the cone of error covering Tolland, Windham, Middlesex, New London County, moving up and out by about, let's call it 10, 11 o'clock. The bulk of the effects will be out of Connecticut. So here's the guidance. Watch what we're dealing with over the next couple of hours. And I've got Long Island in here as well to show you that as we get to 10:30, around the time that storm should strike part of the Hamptons up to Montauk Point, you could see the deep colors indicative of heavy flooding rain, and along high tide, storm surge is going to be the bigger issue. Meanwhile, as we go to 12 o'clock, that's where the rain really starts to kick up along the Connecticut shoreline. 2 o'clock has a couple of these feeder bands continuing to throw westward, even down over into Fairfield County. Also remember, because we had this issue with Sandy as well back in 2012, a lot of the water that ends up in the Long Island Sound as it gets pushed in has nowhere to go, and that could be a bigger problem for coastal flooding along parts of Fairfield and New Haven County as we go down the line. Rain tapers off overnight tonight. It'll take a little longer for the winds to subside, but again, looking for the potential of anywhere between 35 and 55 to 65 mile per hour winds, the highest amount near obviously the center of the storm. Storm surge warning for the shoreline. That's the problem, because not only are we looking at 3 to 5 feet above storm surge, we're looking at a high tide that's coming in at a full moon cycle. So often is the case where the high tides are a little higher than usual at a full moon. High tide in Old Saybrook's at 10:53. That's close to where the storm will be making landfall in the vicinity. So we don't really have that on our side. All right, we'll keep an eye on that. Here's what you need to know. Rain bands increasing, winds ramping up as well. This afternoon, heavy rain mainly on the western side of the state, wind on the eastern side. Let's see which is worse in terms of the power outages or the flood potential. And later on, that landfall a little bit farther to the east. That's been the trend over the last 24 hours, but still storm surge is going to be a real issue, especially at high tide.